to have him give kind of an exclusive to COMTO as he takes on this new role for America's largest transit system. And of course, for so many of us who are interested in the accessibility issue in transit, having a voice for this issue at New York MTA is extremely significant. It's a system that, because of its age, there are a number of accessibility deficits that need to be addressed. And of course, what we want to do is give him an opportunity to come in and talk with us and give a sense of how he sees things walking into the job. Obviously, he just got there recently, and so we're not going to ask him to perform miracles, but I think we want to hear his perspective on what he sees so far, and what is what's on his agenda in the near term, and maybe some of his long-term goals. This event is sponsored jointly by COMTO's Accessibility Advisory Council, which was formed in 2017. Our mission is to make sure that in addition to the other aspects of diversity that COMTO represents, that people with disabilities are included among them. It's not just about talking about transportation issues for people with disabilities, but more what we do for all other minorities at COMTO: level playing field, equal opportunity, business opportunities for minorities, and people with disabilities who own businesses as well, career opportunities, all of those things. And so far, we've had a wonderful response from the COMTO membership. The advisory council was made permanent after just 1 year of operation because of the great interest from members. And we are jointly sponsoring this event with the New York chapter of COMTO, and we're pleased to have the New York chapter president, Rich Watson, with us. And, of course, whenever it's about New York, everybody wants to hear what's going on. So we want to give Rich an opportunity to say a few words as well before we begin. So maybe, Rich, would you like to, well, actually, before I put Rich on, let me introduce my two co-chairs for the Accessibility Advisory Council: Martin Creathy from Capital Metro in Austin, Texas, and Lena Aragon, who is from Palm Tran in lovely Florida, West Palm Beach, Florida. And the three of us have been having a wonderful time working together on various accessibility issues, and we're excited to be here with our co-sponsor, Rich. So actually making sure that I go in order, let me see. Yes, Rich, would you like to say a few words before we start? And you just have to come off mute, sir.
Let me have to answer this call. I'll be right back.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then you know what? Timing being everything. Rich said that Quemuel was going to be joining in just a second. I'm going to take a look here. I'll give Martin and Lena an opportunity. Would either of you like to give a welcome or any introductory comments before we start?
Certainly. Thank you, Christian. Thanks, everybody. My name is Martin Creathy. I'm the program manager for system-wide accessibility here at Capital Metro in Austin, Texas, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the COMTO Accessibility Advisory Council. As Christian said, we formed in 2017, and we've had an opportunity to host the previous session, a webinar that we did around the 30th anniversary of the ADA. Appreciated all the folks that joined us for that, and I thank you guys for taking the time to join us today. Couple things I'd like to just quickly mention. As Gatriri made mention of, the fall meeting and training conference will be occurring. There's a call for proposals. I want to say that deadline is somewhere around May 15th. I may not have that correct, but One of the interesting things and one of the big wins that the advisory council was able to accomplish was getting an actual track, a conference learning and training track as part of the conference around accessibility and mobility. And so just encourage you guys, if you have any thoughts on proposals, abstracts, presentations, please take advantage of the opportunity to put those forward so that the broader COMTO family can learn from what you have. I see that our guest of honor has joined, so I'm going to turn it back over to Christian.
Okay.
Move along.
Well, thank you very much. And we are delighted that Mr. Quemuel Arroyo is here. I see you there on the screen. Welcome, Quemuel. You have drawn quite a crowd here. As I told you, people were going to be very interested to hear all about you. And so we'd like to turn the spotlight your way and let you begin.
Thank you so much for that, Christian, and thank you all for joining us today. I am so sorry for being late. The team was held up on some last minute meetings, fire drill, so please, my apologies. This is not how I was hoping to start the conversation. However, I am so glad that you're all here with us. And Christian, thank you to you and for the COMTO community at large for inviting me today. It's an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you all. And to spend an hour with you here. So I don't know how much you know about me, Christian. I think it might be good for me to give a little bit of background. As you all know, I'm Quemuel Arroyo, and I am the newly minted first Chief Accessibility Officer here at the MTA. And I come to the MTA as a known entity, having worked with a lot of you all and a lot of the community here from my old job as the Chief Accessibility Specialist at New York City DOT. In between, I was in the private sector. I started a company called Charge with some friends where we really looked at micromobility and tried solving the charging and docking of e-scooters around the world, launching in Paris, Atlanta, LA. But I was drawn back to government because, well, the MTA is the largest transportation network in North America. But beyond that, the stars are aligned for the MTA to really do amazing things, particularly around the world of accessibility and to really craft the narrative of what accessibility really means for the MTA, not only today, but going forward. And I thought that with the governor, the chamber, Pat Foy, Sarah Feinberg, and the team here really created an opportunity to steal me out of the private sector and bring me back to government, where we are doing some really cool, innovative things here. So I was drawn back here mainly because I saw that the leadership was really putting support behind this type of work, and they really did have a keen interest in bringing someone in, not to just be a face or a talking piece for the work that was already happening, but to redefine what the MTA meant and how they thought of accessibility. And the way that I like to think of accessibility is a lot more broad and holistic than what most of you might have heard in the past. I myself am a New Yorker with a disability. I use a wheelchair after a spinal cord injury 13 years ago. However, I understand, and I honestly do believe that the conversation around accessibility is much broader than just that of and for the disability community. In my definition and a lot of my stakeholders, I include parents with strollers. And in New York City, we see on average 130,000 births a year. So in my mind, that's 130,000 strollers that are added to our network, to our streets, to our sidewalk, accessing our systems. So they're definitely part of my definition and my stakeholder groups. In addition to that, aging New Yorkers, many of whom would never say that they are a New Yorker with a disability, but most of whom, maybe even all of whom, I know have different gait, so they don't walk like they used to. Their vision isn't what they used to. So I add those communities into my definition and in my stakeholder groups as well. And I do that very intentionally because I need my demographic to expand, to be much broader than New Yorkers with disabilities alone, and to really help people understand that the conversation and the need for access is much broader than the 1 million New Yorkers with disabilities out here. And redefining it in that mode allows me to ask for a bigger chunk of a budget. It really gives me a seat at the table representing a really large community, not just the community of disabilities, of New Yorkers with disabilities like myself. And Pat Boy and the team here welcome me joining the team to redefine what accessibility looks like. Listen, I hope we can have an engaging conversation. I'd love to hear questions from you all, but let's talk about what that looks like, right? For me, it's going beyond the conversation of what everyone's talking about already, conversations about elevators and accessible in that framework, which the MTA has a plan. We're working very aggressively to make the system more accessible uh, um, in that mode. But what else are we not talking about? What else is missing from the conversation? And the only way that I can ensure that we have those conversations, that those topics come to the table, is by opening up the dialogue to people who we haven't heard from. And my old boss, Polly Trottenberg, who was just minted undersecretary at US DOT, really moved DOT with me in reframing how people thought about accessibility. And we were very keen about the fact that the squeaky wheel gets a lot of the attention, no pun intended here. But the disability community in New York City is very varied, and in the world is very varied. However, we hear from very similar stakeholders most of the time. And it's important for us to understand that this conversation is much broader than the people that we hear from. And it's something that government falls victim of, everywhere, where people who have time and access are those that are able to speak their mind and bring the agenda together. Well, I'm here to say, I hear that, and I'm going to work on those needs, but I need to ensure that I'm having everybody at the table who needs to be here. And I need to open up this conversation. So I rely on the community, and I've opened up my doors, my team, to really engage with the communities and say, what's missing? We hear you on elevators, and we hear you on vertical access. That's coming. But what else are we not doing that we need to do? So what are my priorities right now? My priorities are, I've redefined what accessibility means at the MTA. I am establishing a plan that's going to take us to the next 10, 20, 30 years from today. In what types of work do we engage on, and what is new at the MTA. And already you might have seen some of those changes that I'm super excited about. Things like at the Long Island Railroad, where we unveiled updates to the app, the Long Island Care application, where you now from the app see a train load count before the train pulls into the station. You get to see which individual car has less people in it, how crowded is that car. In the time of COVID, that's super important, right? But beyond that, I'm thinking about, well, that also needs to reflect information about wheelchair space. Where is a passenger with a disability, with a mobility device, going to have the best option to find a spot? Maybe a parent with a stroller. And beyond that, we provided schematics information before you get to a station, the layout of that station, where's the nearest elevator, escalator, staircase. And that's what accessibility looks like, providing people with the information that they want, that they need to have successful interactions moving around our spaces. So we have those updates that are already live at the Long Island Railroad, and I'm super proud about. That's accessibility to me. You'll see a lot of those updates reflected in Metro North. One of the beauties of my job is that this is an MTA-wide role. And what I said earlier, the stars are aligned here at the MTA, and that's what made this role so attractive to me now. And what I mean by that is, we are bringing the house together. We are building one MTA, really allowing me to weave that narrative and that agenda of universal access throughout the entire MTA. And that means pulling in the Long Island Railroad, the Metro North, and New York City Transit, so that we provide the services to all our riders. So that accessibility in upstate New York looks very similar, if not analogous or the same, to accessibility down in the city center, because we can all use more information. we can all use, greater access. And access to information is access to independence. So that's really some of the initiatives that I'm looking to really see woven throughout the network, and really providing a broader access to people who we haven't heard from in the past. People like the low vision and blind community. We have amazing pilots that some of you might have seen at our J Street Metro Tech stations, and that we've been testing for over a year now. So we know what's successful, what's working there, what's not, and what people want to see more of. And you've seen some of those initiatives that were piloted at J Street over a year ago, now seen at Grand Central and in other stations in an iterative form. They're different from how we first put them out there. And that variance has come from engagement with the public, with our staff. And I'll get to my demographics and who I think about and who I plan work for in a second, because it's going to come into play right here, where a lot of the work that we've been doing is for the disability community, is for that accessible community. And we've been engaging with outside stakeholders, parents, the entire disability community, from low vision to cognitive disabilities. And that's really a blind spot that every transit system around the United States, around the world, hasn't really engaged with and doesn't really know what to do about. Well, I'm bringing in people from District 75, our Department of Education system here in New York City, to help me understand the needs of cognitively impaired students, and how can I bring greater access to our transit system so that they too feel that they belong and that they have the tools to be successful. So external stakeholders, absolutely. But my internal stakeholders are employees here at the MTA, and they're part of my community, because we can have conversations with outside stakeholders all day long about what they'd like to see. But if the staff internally can't maintain these things, or worse, if I can't scale a lot of these new things that I put out there that the community is asking for, that I wanted, that I pilot at a station, well, that's almost worse than not doing anything at all, right? Because it becomes a teaser, it becomes a taboo. So really engaging my internal community, my MTA family, to understand I'm new to, in-house. So tell me, what have you been working on? What's been successful? What are we not doing that we want to do more of? And in that part of the conversation, I bring up things like the J Street Metro Tech and say, hey, we have over a year of successful pilots here. How has it been on your side? You too are a stakeholder. How do you maintain these features? And how can we scale to replicate these cool pilots now, to make them process, to make them integral to the design process, and so that we can see them reflected at every station throughout the system.
Quemuel, if I could, this is Martin Creathy, excuse me, one of the co-chairs. And, I love everything that I'm hearing. And we actually have a number of questions that are queued up almost just precisely around what you're talking about. And here, as you're talking about the J Street project, or like the lab, innovation lab type concept that you're talking about, one of the questions we had was, can you speak a little bit about what you think the role of technology is and will be going forward in terms of lowering barriers to not just access to the transit system, but to the built environment? Could you touch on that as you're talking about these innovations?
Absolutely. That's part. It's one of the talking points that's coming up next. I just want to define the stakeholders as I see it, to help you understand my framing of it. So we spoke about external stakeholders and community members who need to be added to the table to be part of the conversation. I spoke about my internal community, my MTA family, understanding what they're doing, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what do we want to see more of, and what are we capable of rolling out with the resources that we have available, with the information that we have, and what we hear from the public. And my third demographic, and lastly, I would talk about contractors, the people that the MTA employs to provide the service that we deliver to our clients, to those stakeholders, to our end users. And we have to be very intentional of ensuring that we have requirements in place for ensuring that diversity and that ridership be reflected in the diversity of the people who are doing the work, our contractors, and last, to ensure that the service that they provide meets the standard of that our stakeholders needs. And in that conversation, I like to bring in the space for innovation. I've been in government for a good number of years to know that government doesn't have the ability or agility to be nimble, to be agile. That's for the private sector to do. My role in government is to invite the private sector and say, hey, bring your innovation, bring your new designs, bring your technological solutions and apps into the needs that I have from my stakeholders. And we don't have the money or time to be that innovative, but I know what my needs are, and I need to trust the private sector to come in and walk me through these pilots, educate me on what works, what my users could benefit, the solutions that would respond to the needs that my people, my stakeholders are asking for. And that's where, success happens, right? And I think, my big stake here will be providing that long-term plan, that long-term vision that defines the gaps in the services that we provide today, and tell everybody how we're going to get there and when we're planning on getting there, so that there's clarity around mission and vision and a timeline, right? And secondly, providing effective communication so that everyone's getting the same information. And in that sphere is where I bring in things like technology, because I honestly do believe that technology has the power to close the gaps of inequality that we have in this conversation. And I said it before, but to reiterate, access to information. Information delivers independence. And that's what I want for all my transit riders, to have the tools that they need to be successful as they move around. And for a lot of the things that come up as a need, as an inequality, as a gap in that communication, those tools, technology provides me that medium to deliver information in an accessible, digestible way for a wide variety of people, including riders with cognitive disabilities. One of the things that we're piloting at J Street is Magna Cartas, a company that provides wayfinding navigation from the comfort of a person's home, so that before they get to a busy train station, a busy exchange, they have walked through that station. They've seen the station, and they've heard of how to navigate it, so that when they get there and they're inundated by thousands of people all around, they don't have to be overwhelmed because they know the blueprint, they know the pathway. That's the type of successful interactions that I'm looking to create for all of our riders. In a similar fashion, for low vision and blind transit riders, we give them access to pathways to navigating our systems before they encounter them. And when they get to our systems, we augment their experience by having projects like Navalent, another company that we're working, which leverages QR codes and smartphones to give additional information to the low vision or blind pedestrian, to do exactly what was just put in the chat, pathways for all, information for all, giving the tools that people need to be successful for everyone. And lastly, the last thing I'll say is, one of the interactions that you might have heard of that just came out of one of my community groups in engagement was we are calling people back to the transit systems. We want people to take the bus, take the train. New York is open for business. I ride the subway every day. I move around, and I want New Yorkers to do so because it's safe. We're spending millions of dollars to clean our transit systems. Even when we had to pull back services on subways, our buses never stopped. Our paratransit services never stopped. And we're getting New Yorkers out. We're moving New Yorkers, right? But what we need for that to continue to happen is we need to make sure that everyone's safe when they're moving around. And a big community in New York City are children. We have the largest department of public education system in the country with over 1.1 million students, yet we weren't giving masks out for children. And this point came from one of our parents, a mother who said, Q, I love everything that you're doing, and you've given over, 10 million masks out to the public. However, you don't have any children's masks. And I said, absolutely. You're absolutely right, Christine. So we asked the state to chip in, and the state came through with over 60,000 masks for children. And I was out with the chairman in the Bronx distributing masks because we're saying we're open for business and we want everyone to feel safe coming back. And that includes our children, that includes people, kids going back to school, kids moving around with their parents. And that's what accessibility looks like to me. Really providing the resources, the tools for everyone to come in and have successful outcomes, successful interactions in our transit systems. I'll stop there because I've been talking for 20 minutes straight, and I hope that y'all have questions for me. Please, there's no bad question.
We've got questions. We definitely got questions for you.
Perfect. And just to reiterate, you can ask me about my background in the private sector. Before DOT, I was at Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch working in banking, but transitioning to government because government has the power to change lives. The MTA moved over 6.5 million people a day prior to COVID. We're getting back. We're at 2.2 million last I checked. So ask me about anything in between that or beyond.
Sure, we got a couple things loaded up, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague Lena to look into the chat as I look at our time here. All right, let's you touched a little bit on technology. Let me take us back to your stakeholder question. So ADA compliance is certainly the floor, not the ceiling. And when we're talking about accessibility, there's and you mentioned it a few times, universal access, universal design. Could you talk a little bit about your thoughts on universal design concepts and sort of couching, looking at projects and plans and the whole piece about accessing transit systems with universal design concepts, sort of going one step further than accessibility,
Absolutely.
as you were touching on with seniors and parents and strollers. Yeah, just touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin. So my background is in urban design and architectural studies, and I really think that as a society we are all struggling with, undoing the Vitruvius Man, and for all the great things that Da Vinci left us, he really did us in a horrible way by thinking that the Vitruvius Man is our prototype for what we build. Not only in the physical space, but for products, services. We all have a prototype in our mind of who our stakeholders are and who we're creating programs, products, services, and physical spaces for. We see the world not as it is, but as we experience it. And I'll repeat that. We all interact with the world in the way that we experience it, not as it is built. And what I mean by that is we all have very different needs. And we're all blinded by the experiences that our needs afford us or our abilities provide us. So when I think of universal design and constructing new spaces, I'm always thinking about that stakeholder with the highest need. Because if I build programs, services, spaces for that stakeholder with the biggest needs, then I'm providing for everybody. And that does not look like the Vitruvius Man who's, robust, strong, 6 foot tall, white male, but everything in between that space, we need to create universal design. For me, is design that conforms to the non-compliant body. And what I mean by that is that takes the body from birth to death and everything in between. Because if we're all so lucky, we'll all experience disability in some fashion. And it'll be because we all live to 110 and we don't walk or see the way we once used to when we were in our 20s. So that's what I think about when I'm thinking of universal design and access for all, is designing for the people with the highest needs to ensure that everyone is serviced.
I love that. Let me ask another question here because we're here. This is a COMTO family affair. Certainly, there are others from other organizations joining us, but we had a previous conversation with yourself and my other co-chairs, around COMTO and COMTO representation. Can you talk a little bit about some of your thoughts on the intersectionality around, you know, disability representation and minority representation and the importance of that in the transportation industry?
Absolutely, Martin. But I'll get to transportation in a second. But let me go macro for just a bit. I am a New Yorker with a disability, but that's not my identity. My identity is made up of so much more than that one piece of who I am. And every day I'm a New Yorker with a disability, but I'm also an immigrant, and I'm Dominican, and I'm Black, and I'm all these other things that make up who I am. And it's not a zero sum, right? It's not that my Blackness makes me less disabled or that my disability takes over my Dominicanness. You know, the beauty of our society is our difference. And we need to learn to embrace that and step away from this ethos that one thing takes away from another, and really understand that we bring our best self forward when we bring all of us forward. And that has to be reflected in everything that we do. You know, and in this conversation about transportation, we need to be very aware of the people that are excluded from the spaces that are created, from the programs and services, and even the conversations that we hold. This Zoom meeting right now, it is being held in this platform, and there are people who are not engaging for whatever reason. We need to think about who are those people? Is it people that would love to hear what we have to say, that would love to participate, but they might not have broadband access? So in every space that we create, we need to be conscious about who are we omitting by the design of this space. And in the world of transportation, far too often we forget that our stakeholder is not who we think we have. Our stakeholder is a very broad, diverse bodies of communities. We talk about COVID and what COVID has done to the transportation system. Well, there's one demographic that has never stopped riding the bus or the subway, and not only in New York but around the world. You have your Black and brown minorities who are who work in service, who are essential workers. They've always been out here. Yet when we have community board meetings, when we put out projects, they're not at the table. And we need to ask ourselves, what's happening here? How do we not get the people who are ride or die at the tables when we're talking about what we're changing, what's coming up, what we're talking about, what's missing? And the only way that we're going to change the outcomes to improve the services is by engaging those people that are omitted from the conversations. And on the flip side of that is we in government, we in these establishments like COMTO have to ensure that we go the extra mile to provide space that is accessible for all those voices that are silenced, that are not at the table, and doing the homework of figuring out why that is. And once we do that, it's on the community to come out. And I say this in every conversation I have, with my Dominican people up in Washington Heights who tell me that, they don't speak English, so they don't come. And I said, pause. We have translators. Let us do the heavy lift. All we want is for you to show up and let's hear your experiences, because if we don't hear it, we cannot be faulted for what we don't know. And we don't know what we don't know, but we rely on the community, on that stakeholder to educate us. And I say this every day. I am a New Yorker with a disability, but I am not an expert in all disabilities. I am an expert in cues disability, because you bring two people with the same disabilities and they have very different experiences. So we rely on individuals who are struggling to educate us in what's missing and what's not happening for us to create the change that they want to see.
I like that, especially your comment about the spaces. I'm going to pause here, and I'm gonna turn my attention to my colleague Lena Aragon. If she could source us some questions from the audience, so you can hear from some of the other folks. But I just want to say that what I did like about that last comment was, in terms of what you were saying about interpretation services, it's sort of if you build the spaces, that are accessible to people, they will come. That old adage, if you build it, they will come. But yeah, if you create those spaces and invite people in, they will come. So let's see do we have any questions in our chat box for our guests?
Yes, Martin. Hi, good morning. Well, good afternoon here in Florida and in the East Coast already. For you guys in other areas, you're probably still in the morning, but we are here already in the afternoon. So yes, we have a few questions. It's no secret that you have a very daunting task, to accomplish. Everybody is well aware of, that you are the first person in this particular role in such a huge agency, which is considered a victory for all of us that have been advocating for disabilities. And we're very excited to finally have somebody in that representation, in that capacity at such a big agency. So if you could tell us, in your opinion, what is one of the biggest challenges you think you will have to overcome in your new role? And what is your plan to overcome that challenge?
Thank you for that question, Lena. There are so many challenges that I can explore and discuss with us all here today. But I think the main challenge that I face, and it comes up in almost all spaces that I talk about, the really tough topic of disability accessibility, and that is people's apprehension to engage in the conversation because of their fear of saying the wrong thing or failing. And I'm a big fan of failure, because there's no success without failure. And we've seen the commercials about Michael Jordan and others talking about how many times they failed before they succeeded. Good enough cannot be the enemy of great. Sometimes good enough is what we have, and we need to come out with what we have. To not engage, to not have these conversations because we're afraid of saying the wrong thing or hurting someone's feelings. It's just, not an excuse. It's not a good out anymore, because when you omit, that's the only guaranteed path to failing, because, people feel like, oh, well, I don't see myself represented in your website, your conversations, your goals. So you're not doing anything for me. And the reality is that at DOT, when I was there, with over 5,000 employees, and here at the MTA with over 70,000 employees, the reality couldn't be further from that. The reality is that everyone wants to do better. And there's a lot of things in the works that the public doesn't know about. And they don't know about that because people are afraid of, the public not liking it, or thinking that it's not good enough, or thinking that they completely missed the boat. And I'm here saying, what do we got to hide? Open it up, get people involved, get people engaged, and let people know what you're doing, because no one here isn't trying to improve the services, enhance what's already there. All of us are concerned about over promising, under delivering, and going beyond our means. We in government have to be very conscious and honest about the fact that we do not have unlimited fundings. We don't have unlimited money. And we have to be strategic. We have to be smart about what we do with the resources that we have available to us. But that's not an excuse for not engaging with folks and saying, hey, this is what I'm up to right now. please opine, please tell me what you think about this. That level of honesty and transparency is exactly what the community needs to hear, to understand that, wait, you might not see yourself reflected, but we've surveyed your communities. We've heard about the concerns that you have over there. This is what we have in the works for you. And that's my biggest challenge, getting people to overcome the fear of failing and not saying what somebody wants to hear, because we don't know until we try.
Lena, do you have, I think we've got time for maybe one or two more before we start to land this plane and have Richard say a few things from the COMTO New York chapter. But you got another one more, maybe two?
You're on mute. You're on mute, Lena.
Sorry about that, guys. I keep forgetting to unmute myself. So yes, Martin, we do have some more questions. This one comes from Wanda Brown. Wanda is asking us, please elaborate on MTA commitments to engage small disadvantaged firms to meet your diversity and inclusion goals.
That's a great question. And I first have to say that we have an amazing diversity team here at the MTA, and they are absolutely on board with me of looking at those three demographics, our stakeholders, our employees, and our contractors. As some of you might know, the MTA is one of the top 10 organizations in the state of New York that is overperforming in the governor's requirement for MWBEs, minorities, women, and Black businesses to perform a lot of our contract work. Just last week, we had a great meeting with the community at large, new businesses, new entrepreneurs that have companies that want to be contractors with the MTA, and getting them in our approved vendors list, getting them through those processes that could be obtuse, vague, or hard to navigate. We have an amazing system to bring those people into our database, into our platform. But two, we have mandates that we require now. And our chief diversity officer is at the table with our chief procurement officer, and they're having conversations about, if a procurement doesn't come back with X number of minority, woman, Black owned businesses, contractors, we're going to have to reissue that RFP. We're going to have to, rebid these works, because we need to ensure that we're building a middle class and that we're providing access so that, and you heard me say it earlier, the people who are doing our work reflect the community that is our client and our stakeholders. People need to see themselves reflected in these spaces, in these communities. And that means, the people who do the work need to look like the people who receive the work. And in New York, that's a very diverse crowd. So we are building floors, and we're exceeding in all of those requirements those floors that we're setting. We're going above and beyond, because we have people like Pat Foy, like Kavesh, and like Michael Gardner, our chief diversity officer, our procurement officers, who are really keen about having that work being reflected.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. And I hope that answers to our member here, her question. So very briefly, what are the 3 top recommendations you would give to a transit system to make them more accessible? What are your 3 top things that you will say, do this and you will be making improvement?
Absolutely. First is look at your data. Do you know your asset? And that might be a weird thing to say, but I've sit in many groups with folks from around the world, from around the United States, and they don't know their assets in many times. They don't know the number of curb ramps that they have. They don't know the number of accessible stations that they may have. They don't know the number of digital platforms, screen readers, or things like that that they provide. So know your asset. is the number one. Do your survey, do your self-evaluation and understand your asset. Because if you can't quantify it, then you can't measure it, you won't be able to do anything to change it. So know your asset is the number one. Number two is know your stakeholders and engage your stakeholders. You heard me talk about how we're doing that here at the MTA and how I've done that. And my ethos of, the best policies come from within the communities. Well, that only works if you engage with your stakeholders. And number three, I would say, think about who are you excluding from the spaces that you're creating. And that means many different things, right? That means, a train line, a new train line, a bus route, with the efforts to become more efficient, to streamline operations, we cut services from some communities, and we need to understand, what does that service cut look like, and what does that mean for those community people? So those would be my top three. Yeah, there's so many, but I think, start there, and you'll cover your bases for sure.
That's a great answer. Those are great takeaways for our transit friends. We have three clear, recommendations that I personally think that are great, because they are the basis to, to start actually looking at ourselves and making sure that our systems are accessible. So we have time for one last question. So if you have the power to see the future, where do you see the transportation industry in terms of accessibility in 20 years?
Ooh, that's a tough one, but I like it. For the Star Treks on the call, I go by Q, and you might remember there's a Q, character. So this is important for me. Listen, the future, I am excited about the future. I'm excited of, this new administration in Washington, and I'm excited that this conversation is at the forefront. We're no longer hiding from these tough conversations about diversity, disabilities, accessibilities. And I hope that what we see in the future is shared access to a transit system that serves all its intended users, its desired users, and everyone who wants to play in those environments. And what that looks like is, giving people access to opt in to move around those transit networks, transit spaces, and whatever needs they may have at their leisure in their own time. And that's how I define accessibility: giving people the tools that they need to come out into their community on their own time with whatever needs they might have. But for that to happen in 20 years or in the future, we need OEMs to start engaging in these conversations. If you look at, our car manufacturers, our buses, they haven't changed significantly or at all in the past, 30, 50 years. The car is the same box that we saw when it was introduced to us in the Ford Revolution. So many people are excluded from that. I'm excluded from that, because I use a manual wheelchair. I'm lucky that I get to fold that up, but we talk about the London car and that it's accessible. It's not universal. It may be accessible for people who have manual chairs like me, but my friends in their power chairs can't come. My friends in their power scooters can't get into a London Black car. So in the future, we've redesigned these spaces so that we don't leave people behind. In the future, we provide people with access to opt in at their leisure when they want to, so that they can really enjoy the quality of life that they would like for themselves.
That's fantastic. I have a colleague who, it took me a while until I noticed it, but at the bottom of her signature line on her emails, it simply says the future is accessible. And I want to thank you, Q, if I may be so bold as to call you that, sir. I want to thank you for availing us of your time, of the great thoughts and the vision that you have, and in the role that you have, your background, all of this I think has been of great value to myself, and I think to the broader COMTO family. In the few minutes we have, we want to give an opportunity to our friend Richard with COMTO New York to say a few things as our co-sponsor, and then we'll wrap ourselves up.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And thanks again, Q, for joining us today and having this conversation on such a relevant and timely topic. I recall a couple of weeks ago when you and I, we had our conversation, we were on the same page about a couple of things. One was that, transportation is like the equalizer to access. And that, when we talk about accessibility, well, that's the response to challenges when it has to deal with isolation and traveling disadvantages. And, we were on the same page about other things. But, I just want to say that receiving your perspective today, coming from a region that has like the largest mass transportation provider is awesome. You provided us with a lot of food for thought. And definitely, I would say it's kind of like a call to action, right? It's to be more innovative. It's to think outside the box and leverage technology to its fullest. But what's also equally important I got from you today is the collaboration and inclusion, right? We need the input from an empirical perspective, right? From the end users of our system. They have to be at the table and tell us what the needs truly are in order for us to come up with some kind of programs, and that their input should actually be the driving force for us building out our strategies to, enhance our accessibility in transportation. That's a very important voice. And having someone like you sitting at that table to express those views is going to come very credible, right? Because of your background and the things that you've encountered and the things that you've learned, and that the energy that you are putting out there to engage the communities to get that information. So I think it's going to be awesome. And, with listening to you, I kind of found like, equity and mobility, they have to be in the same conversation, right? In order to build out future programming. If you want something to be actionable and sustainable, right? For your end users. So I just want to thank you. I know that, it's a task for you, and I'm confident that you're definitely going to move the needle. You appear to already know how to navigate the process, and, you have the balance, right? You can prioritize the social, political, and economic components of this whole process. So I truly feel that, we are headed in the right direction with accessibility here in the New York region. And like I said before, COMTO New York, we are there to help support, move the needle in any way possible. So thanks for joining us today, and appreciate working with you and look forward to working with you in the future. But I just wanted to just plug in. I want to plug in something, right? To Wanda's question, COMTO New York, right? I just want to give some information. On May 18th, we're going to have a business-to-business summit. And at that business-to-business summit, we're going to be inviting in our primes and our small businesses to have conversations about the RFP process, how to engage the MTA to capture some of their projects, especially around accessibility, right? So if you have time, please join us at this the Business Mini Summit. I'll send it to Gagwiri, and she'll send it out to everyone. And I look forward to seeing everyone there. With that being said, I have a hard stop at 1 o'clock. So thank everyone for joining us today. Have a great day.
Before you all leave, I just want to just draw your attention to make sure that you go to our website to get more information about some of our events and deadlines. And I wanted to call your attention on May 15th, we have a deadline for the call for papers for our fall virtual conference. And there is an accessibility track. So if there's some accessibility topics that you'd like to discuss and bring to the forefront, that would be a great opportunity for you to get some exposure to our audience. And with that, once again, you can check us out on comtonational.org. We have our events calendar, as well as information on how to become a member. So with that, thank you all and have a great afternoon. And thank you, sir, Mr.
Thank you.
Arroyo.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Quemuel. You were wonderful, wonderful, an eminently quotable person.
Thank you so much.
Really are. Really appreciate all that you're doing. Please know you can call on your COMTO family for anything. And we are
Absolutely.
so appreciative of your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Cheers. Have a good one.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the Zoom now.
Thank you.
Zoom.